All right, well, welcome everybody. Really appreciate you being with us. My name is Matt Bennett with Third Way. I'm going to bow out here in just a moment, turn it over to our moderator. But just before I do, I wanted to thank them both for participating. Antjuan Seawright is a good friend of Third Way and a very prominent political expert and commentator based in South Carolina. And then, of course, we have the legendary Congressman Jim Clyburn, who was already legendary before he essentially decided who our president would be, and did so in kind of spectacular fashion. So from Third Way's point of view, he is one of our honorary co-chairs, and we owe him a huge debt of gratitude, and we're just delighted to have him with us. Before I sign out here and just watch, I just want to go through a couple of things. Antjuan, as the moderator, is going to ask questions at the start, and then he's going to open it up to some questions from the audience to be submitted in writing. The Q&A function at the bottom of your screen you can use to ask questions, and then our colleagues will go through those questions and get them to Antjuan, and he'll get to as many of them as he can in the time that we have allotted. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Antjuan and thank him and Mr. Clyburn again for joining us.
Matt Bennett, let me say what I oftentimes say to you in private, and that's thank you for your friendship. And thank you for the work that Third Way continues to do to help this country become better. And when this country is better, I believe Democrats equally come better. We know we oftentimes say in South Carolina, it takes a village to raise a child, but in South Carolina politics, we say it takes a village to win elections. And Third Way is such a key component to the Democratic village, and I appreciate it. To all of you who have decided to join us at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, let me say what we know in South Carolina to be the two most important words in the English language, and those words are thank you. It is because of your participation. I firmly believe we have every reason in the world to believe that our best days are ahead of us, because on yesterday, it was solidified for the umpteenth time that Joe Biden is our president-elect and Kamala Harris is our vice president-elect. And I firmly believe it is because of the work that the Third Way Village contributed this election cycle that got us to this point. I am so pleased and honored to be joined by my mentor, political father, and of course, the highest ranking African-American member of the US Congress. He certainly needs no introduction. But shortly after Barack Obama was elected in 2008, one of the first speeches he gave, he mentioned this and it stuck with me and it still sticks with me to this day. And I often repeat it when I have the chance to present him. Barack Obama said, when Jim Clyburn speaks, the entire Congress listens. Every time I've had the honor of presenting him, I often say, when Jim Clyburn speaks, the entire world listens. For anyone who's ever questioned my introduction of him, you look back to that February in South Carolina when he decided to put his footprint on the political scale and endorse Joe Biden. I think the world changed forever. And as I said to him in private, the political furnace rearranged in this country for a very long time, in fact, forever. And it's because of his engagement and involvement. And boss, as I said to you before, I firmly believe in my heart, you will go down as the most consequential elected official of our day. And so I'm so honored that you took the time to join me in Third Way today. So welcome to you. Let's jump right into this, but I'll let you give some open commentary to kick us off, and then we'll jump right into a very in-depth discussion.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Antjuan, and thanks to Third Way. Mr. Bennett, I think he's left us, but I really appreciate the long relationship I've had with Third Way. I'm not as good of an attendee at the meetings as I should be, but I stay in close touch with them to help frame the things that I wish to try and get done in order to be a more effective congressperson. So I thank them for that relationship. Let me just say that, what I try to do in all of my work was incented by our Pledge of Allegiance. when I was growing up in Sumter, we used to say the pledge every morning. And we used to delight in saying the pledge, though we knew way back then that the last phrase of that pledge, which means so much, really had yet to come to pass, with liberty and justice for all. I've adopted the sentiments of that in trying to carry out my duties and responsibilities here in the Congress, trying to make the greatness of this country accessible and affordable for all. That's what I'm trying to do. And so I'm pleased to be here this morning to talk about a little bit of that and answer your questions, Antjuan. But you know me well enough to know that I may not answer all the questions. I'll respond to all of them, but I may not answer all of them.
You've earned the right to do so. You've earned the right to do so. I'll start with obviously the thing that's on everybody's mind. You flirted with this a little bit in the media, but I think it's so important to slow things down and talk about your engagement and your involvement in the presidential primary process. There were a lot of people in DC and on other TV networks other than CBS where I am, who laughed at me when I said the road to heaven and the White House runs through South Carolina. And whoever wins South Carolina was likely going to be our Democratic nominee and go on to be the president of the United States. Well, all that happened. And it happened because 50% of the people who cast their vote for Joe Biden in South Carolina did it because of your involvement, your endorsement. Walk us through how you got there, what led you to not just endorse, but publicly endorse and press the gas or mash the gas, as we say where I'm from, to create the necessary surge that perhaps not only rehab Joe Biden's campaign and his candidacy, but launch him on to be the Democratic nominee.
Well, as you know, Antjuan, it all started with my fish fry last year. At that fish fry, 20, all but 2 of the people who were running on the Democratic ticket, running for the Democratic nomination, were at that fish fry. 2 of them had some slight emergencies and could not attend, but the other 21 were there. And after that, it was the biggest fish fry we'd ever had. Over 7,000 people, the police department started turning people away. So the excitement was there. People were just really engaged in the process. So that night when I went home, my late wife was ill at the time and she could not attend the fish fry. So we talked about it when I got home, and we were talking about how big the field was. And she said to me way back then, the best bet for Democrats in this upcoming election is Joe Biden. Now, her reason was that the incumbency was of such that needed somebody who could withstand what she knew would be coming their way. And so I kept that in mind. I never said much about it. But then when we were getting ready for the South Carolina primary, you remember that primary is going to be on that Tuesday, the last Tuesday of the month. And I went home the week before and got a notice on Thursday night that my longtime accountant was being funeralized the next morning at St. John's Baptist Church in rural Richland County, South Carolina. And I decided on my way to Charleston for the weekend and run up to the bay, I would go to the funeral. And on my way down, I stopped off at the funeral. And when I went down to pay respects, I turned away and my eyes met the eyes of a lady sitting on the front bench of the pew who beckoned me over to her. And I went over. She said to me, I need to ask you a question. And if you want anybody here to answer, lean down and whisper in my ear. And she asked me, who are you voting for in this primary? And I leaned down, whispered in her ear, I'm voting for Joe Biden. She snapped her head back, and there was a look on her face that I've never been able to explain. And she said to me, I needed to hear that, and this community needs to hear from you. And that's all I could think about. So after that funeral, I'm driving down to Charleston. If you recall, I called you and I said, Antjuan, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to endorse. I'm going to do it the morning after the debate. And I said to you, find some places, because I'm going to meet with Joe Biden on Sunday night. I'm going to tell him what I'm going to do. And on Monday, I want you to get ready to do some radio tapes for Black radio. I need to do some robocalls. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted not just to make an endorsement, I wanted to create the surge. And so you and I got together. I met with Joe Biden on Sunday night, told him what I was going to do. I told him what I thought he needed to do in the debate. And he did his job on Tuesday night. Wednesday morning, I made the endorsement. Wednesday morning afterwards, you started those radio ads. We sent out the robocalls and waited on Saturday. And then the votes came in Saturday night. We had a 29-point victory. And I felt that was the momentum we needed. But the next morning, I got up and went to Goldsboro, North Carolina, and then back down to Fayetteville. And everywhere I went, people were talking about that endorsement, what it meant to them. And they were telling me it's going to make a difference here in North Carolina. And then the results, headlines. And I called you again. I said, man, it's working. Get those ads down to Alabama, get them out to Texas. Let's do this. We can do it. That's how it happened.
It happened, and I think the world should know that we ate fish that Sunday morning when we went to Goldsboro, North Carolina. If you remember, that was what we had for lunch. We had fish. That's
exactly right.
Now, I won't tell them about the jack you had and the vodka I had. We'll do that for another day.
Well, it was Sunday, so we had to do communion.
There you go. You know, because of all of that, for the first time in American history, a Black woman from Oakland, California, a Lynx, AKA former prosecutor, HBCU graduate, all the things that come along with Kamala Harris, is now the vice president-elect. As the father of 3 daughters, I know how I felt as a grandson of sharecropping Black women who never thought they would see that day. As the father of 3 daughters, knowing that it was partly because of your engagement, your involvement, Joe Biden decided to write Kamala Harris into history. What do you think that means for the country? What do you think it means for the party? And what do you think it means for someone like you?
You know, every now and then you have to have some of a breakthrough. You know, when we were looking at who ought to be on the ticket, people had various recommendations to make. When I spoke with Joe about that, I told him what I thought various assets were. And when it came to Kamala Harris and Val Demings, I talked about their connections with HBCUs and what that would mean. I also talked about their connection with, you know, a lot of people don't realize fraternities and sororities in the Black community are totally different than there are in the white community. There are social organizations in the white community, but they are service organizations in the Black community. You know, Kamala and AKA Val or Delta, both my daughters, or 2 of my 3 daughters, are Deltas. And it's very, very important to the Black community. The links. Now, Mignon is not a Delta, but she's a link. These groups are really the service groups in the African American communities, because people forget and sometimes they don't have enough experience to know that I could not be a member of the Rotary Club when I was coming along, or the Optimist Club, or the Lions Club. They were white-only groups and men only. And so the service stuff in the African-American community is done to the fraternities. So you may be a Lion, and some other black person would be an Alpha. Another black person would be an Omega or a Kappa, rather than a Kiwanis or some other, an Optimist. That's just the way it is. So when these, I gave those as pluses for those women. I went through about 5 or 6 women that I thought would be good. Marsha Fudge used to be an international president of the Deltas. That means something in the African-American community. You remember when Joe Biden presented her as to be a HUD secretary? He brought up her presidency of Delta Sigma Theta. That's a big, big deal in the African-American community. So I think Kamala Harris is going to help redefine people's attitudes toward these black sororities and toward historical black colleges and universities. I often talk, in fact, this morning, I was on with a group and I was talking about Ron McNair, who, by the way, is an Omega, but he went to North Carolina A&T. And Ron McNair told me just before he went up in their last flight, he was about to become a professor at the University of South Carolina. He said to me that every place I go, people introduce me as having a PhD from MIT. He had a PhD in physics. But he told me, were it not for North Carolina A&T, when he left little Lake City, South Carolina, it was those professors at North Carolina A&T who had backgrounds similar to his who were able to help him remediate and set on course to go to MIT. And James Clark, the president of South Carolina State, also an MIT graduate, he heard me tell a story about Ron McNair one time. He came up to me after, he said, I was his classmate. So we were classmates at MIT. And he was the best prepared student in our class to be at MIT, made possible by North Carolina A&T. So I think that Kamala is going to do a tremendous service, not just as vice president, but she'll help to educate some people as to what HBCUs are all about. Because you and I have both heard a lot of white people say, the only reason you go to an HBCU, and I've heard them say about South Carolina State, the only reason anybody would go to South Carolina State, you remember we had an elected official to say it, is because they can't get in any other school. Well, that is just a lie. I never applied any place else but South Carolina State. I might not have been able to get into any other school. I'll never know, because I never applied anywhere else. The only place I ever wanted to go to school from the time I was a 5th or 6th grader, I wanted to go to South Carolina State. I would not apply any place else. My mother wanted me to go north to school. The only argument I ever won with her was going to South Carolina State.
Smart man. We're going to fast forward the tape a little bit, boss. The coalition that ended up electing Joe Biden and Kamala Harris did not look like the coalition that elected Barack Obama twice, or even Bill Clinton twice. It certainly did not look like the coalition that elected Donald Trump. It was fueled by young people, fueled by African-American voters. Those two constituencies perhaps are the most transformational of our day. You're a student of history. You know that every major movement in this country has been fueled by young people and by Black people. This election was no different. For you, and knowing where we have to go as a party, knowing that for the first time in American history, 30 million eligible Black voters were eligible to participate. If you look at Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, those states were won because we had a surge in African-American turnout. All those things are true, and it made it possible for us to get to this moment we had yesterday in solidifying Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. What does that mean for Democrats going forward?
Well, it means that we have to take a hard look at the things that are necessary to incent that group or incentivize. Now, I keep saying incent because that's the old word. I know that incentivize has now been made a word in the new dictionaries. To incentivize those voters, we need to engage those voters and engage them where they are. A lot of people, I'm 80 years old, but I do not hesitate to engage. Jamie Harrison talks to me all the time about the things we do in South Carolina. You in that group, what we do to try to make sure that there is a healthy balance of age, connoting some degree of wisdom and experience, and youth, some degree of strength and abundance of energy. We have to keep that together. And I think that what we do in the Democratic Party so often, we think that one comes at the expense of the other, and it should not be. It is because Joe Biden is getting ready to be sworn in as the oldest president ever sworn in to the presidency of the United States. I mean, not reelected, but sworn in for the first time. He is getting to be that. He carried the youth vote. Why? It's because he appealed to them where they are. And of course, he had some help with young people they look toward the future in this country. They did not want to see this democracy taken down. And that's what the incumbent president was about to do. He was about to destroy everything young people in this country have been taught to believe in, and that they work and educate themselves to participate in a democracy, not an autocracy. And that's where we're in danger of. So I think it's important for us to keep young people engaged in the process and do what is necessary to bring more young people in. That's why we created that fellowship down in South Carolina. We take 40 to 60 young people every year. We're now in the 5th year, and stay with them for a solid year to get them to learn South Carolina politics, learn a little bit about what politics mean in this country so that they can be ready. See, when I was coming along, we had a lot of civic stuff in schools. For some reason, they're taking that out of schools. I don't know what that means. And so what we've got to do as a party is to really go about the business of getting young people engaged and involved.
We had much success at the top. Some would argue, I'm not necessarily in that crowd, we did not have as much success as anticipated at the bottom of the ticket. Yes, we still have the majority, and I'm so thankful for that. But it will once again not only be the most diverse majority in our nation's history, but it will be perhaps one of the most fragile majorities in our nation's history. We lost seats. We lost in places. Donald Trump won in 16. We won in 18, and we lost some of those seats in 2020. You, others, including myself, have made the argument about some of the rhetoric, some of the messaging that have come from other Democrats that have had impact on perhaps some of the reason we have a very fragile majority. Going forward, as Democrats, what are we going to have to do to stay laser focused, one, on being one band, one sound, but continuing to make progress in winning places that could be known as traditional Republican strongholds, but where we know Democrats can have success if we do things the right way?
Well, I think that what we have to do is really recognize that communities are as diverse as the people who represent them. Now, if I come to Congress from South Carolina right now, I'm the only Democrat in the congressional delegation. Will be next year. There are 2 of us this time. And we made a breakthrough 2 years ago, and we lost that seat. I know why we lost that seat. You know why we lost that seat. And then I don't understand why people who don't live in South Carolina, some of whom may never have even been in South Carolina, can tell me that they know why Joe Cunningham lost. I'm there. He doesn't have but 6 counties in his congressional district. He shared all 6 of those counties with me. We shared those 6 counties. Yet you who've never been there going to tell me what will work in those counties, and I've been in those counties all 80 of my years. That's what we don't do in our party enough. We have to learn to respect each other's backgrounds and experiences. If you want me to respect your background and your experience, don't you think I have a right to expect you to respect mine? So we need to bring this together. You know, we have to treat our partner like you treat your family. You know, I have 3 daughters. You just mentioned that. They're different. I don't treat them the same way. And the reason I don't treat them the same way, I hear people talking about, you got to treat your children equally. I don't, because they don't have equal issues or equal challenges. Mignon is totally different from Jennifer, who is totally different from Angela. So I treat them according to their differences, because one of them may need something that the other will not need. I told somebody, a reporter said to me not long ago, well, a couple of years ago now, says, when Mignon was chair of the, she was the interim chair of the Federal Communications Commission. And in issuing an opinion one time, she made a statement in the opinion, which was 180 degrees from something I said 2 or 3 years earlier. So a reporter came to me and said, look at what your daughter, I just left the Federal Communications Commission, your daughter issued this ruling, and here's what she said. That's opposite of what you said 2 years ago. And I said, well, I paid a lot of money to make her an independent thinker. You know, I don't expect my daughter to think like me. She's had a different set of experiences. So that's what we have to do in our party, recognize that we all bring to this party a different set of experiences. Let's learn to recognize that. And one thing that really gets to me, and I've heard it so often recently, he is just wrong. You don't know that I'm wrong. You may differ with me, and you can do that. But it's only time and circumstances will determine who is right and who is wrong. How many people you heard said how wrong I was for endorsing Joe Biden?
A lot of them.
I'm telling you, more of the social media went crazy. Those daughters of mine were all upset about all the stuff that people were saying about me. Well, every time I look now, somebody's saying, you know what? I think, was it Ron Williams said in his piece the other day, he has come to the conclusion, looking back, that Joe Biden is the only Democrat among the group that could have won. Well, that's what I felt when I did it, simply because Miss Emily told me that he was the only one she thought could win.
Well, shifting to governing, Joe Biden will govern arguably, perhaps, with a split Congress, a very fragile majority. The Congressional Black Caucus will be as large as it's ever been. This will be the first time I know that you will have to govern without 2 of your dearest friends, John Lewis and Elijah Cummings, in a party that's changing, in a caucus that's changing, with so many priorities. From a governing perspective, how should Democrats focus on trying to govern with the president, particularly in the House and a split Senate? How should Democrats recalibrate to make sure they govern in such a way that will prepare them for the 2022 midterms? With this idea that some are very attracted to being social media stars versus doing what it takes to necessarily hold the caucus together so we can have success from a policy perspective and then lead that to having success in the midterms.
Remember, there's one thing that my dad used to tell me all the time, success breeds success. And to me, the very first thing we've got to do is to have a successful result growing out of our COVID-19 issues and experiences and solutions. That's what we got to do. We are not going to be able to do anything for the people of this country until they get in a better place with this pandemic. And we've had enough history. You know, history is my guide for everything. I've studied what happened back in 1918 with the Spanish flu. And at the time of the Spanish flu, we were coming out of World War I. And so that was a double whammy back then. I've studied what Truman did when he set up that committee, the Wheel Pattern Our Select Committee after, to respond to the problems after World War II. So I've studied what we did after World War I, what we did after World War II, and what I try to do is apply some of these things learned to what we're doing now. So I think, and I just finished signing a subpoena for two people in this current administration that I know from all the testimony did things that they should not have done, or did not do things that they should have done. And so what we got to look at all of that and says, let's not make these mistakes. Let's do what is necessary to get our communities beyond this pandemic. That's got to be first and foremost. And after that, we got to put together the most comprehensive infrastructure program ever presented to the American people. And if we do so and treat our the information highway, broadband, the same way we treat the interstate highway when it comes to infrastructure, if we begin to create an environment for clean air, safe drinking water, low-cost energy, these are infrastructure issues. Affordable housing, that's an infrastructure issue. School construction. If we do that, not only do you put in place edifices that will serve us well, but you create jobs. So I'm saying to the president-elect that this is what we got to do. And then we got to be fair about it. That's why we've been pushing this 10, 20, 30. I'm very pleased that he's put it in his platform. And we saw the Secretary of Agriculture the other day when he accepted his nomination. He started talking about 10, 20, 30. What does that mean? That means that 10% of all the money that we appropriate in here will be targeted to those communities who are 20% or more of the population has been stuck beneath the poverty level for the last 30 years. That's what the Census Bureau has said are persistent poverty communities, where 20% more of the population been stuck beneath the poverty level for the last 30 years. So let's target resources into these communities. We aren't talking about people, well, you know, you just talking about Black communities. Oh, no. You go to West Virginia or Kentucky, Mitch McConnell's home, go there. Those are not Black people, those are white people. You go up to Idaho, you go up to North Dakota, South Dakota, go out to Alaska, those aren't Black people, those are white people. Those are Native Americans. You go down to Arizona, to New Mexico, they're brown people. We want to target the resources where they're needed. You don't get the Black people until you get to Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina. We want to target resources where they are needed. And if the Democrats were to do that, the people living in these communities will be forever grateful. They'll know who did it for them. Just like you remember Senator Marshall Williams, who called me, he came by my office one day when I was in the governor's office. He told me, he said, now, we know what happened in this election when you lost. He said, you run again. And the next time you run, you're gonna win. But I want you to do something for me. When you run, you tell the people what you're gonna do for them. And when you get elected, by God, you do it. And then you go back to them and tell them that you've done it. And so that's what we got to do. If we do these things that we said we were gonna do, and we go back to them and tell them that we've done it, we're gonna be fine in 2 years. And we're gonna defy all expectations of those people who think that we are gonna lose the majority 2 years from now.
Staying on the governing front, you've been very, I won't even use the word critical, you've been one of the best accountability partners that Joe Biden could have in terms of his appointments in this administration. You've been loud and proud. about the coalition who got him here and what that word diversity means for you, because it means different things for different people. How do you think he has done now that we've had several rounds of appointments with his appointments in this administration and going forward? If you were to give him some advice out loud, you would say what to him about the filling out of this administration?
I can say that I'm very proud of what he's done thus far. You may remember that I raised some issues in the beginning. And the reason I raised those issues is because people started calling me and people were very upset. They were upset because in the first rollout, I don't know why they did it that way, but the so-called Big Four immediately, Secretary of State went to a white guy who was his friend, the treasurer went to a white woman, and then they left two, defense and attorney general. And people started calling me. They said, when do we get ours? You know, to me, I think none of this would have happened if we said, we're gonna roll out the Big Four all at one time. And we did. Now, we've come along, and I think that I talked to the general this morning. I think we gotta get this waiver done so that we can have the African-American experience in the Defense Department. 40% of our military are minorities. And so we need to, I just think that this is an incredibly good appointment. It requires a waiver. We ought to get together and do the waiver. I know people say, well, we shouldn't be doing these waivers. We've already done it. The president said. You've done it twice before, as recent as less than 4 years ago. And Mattis had less time outside the military than Austin has. So let's just set all that aside and say, let's get this done so that we can move forward. I'm very pleased with what he's done thus far. You know how I feel about Marshall Fudge. We've got Brown Becerra. I feel real good about that appointment. And I think that there'll be more. I think Buttigieg has announced today that he's going to be Secretary of Transportation. That's a community that will be represented in this administration. That's never been openly represented before that I know about. We still got to have somebody at energy. I've heard rumors about energy, and I'm fine with that. We still got to have commerce. We still got to do small business. And I think I'm missing one.
Going back to something that will be on everybody's hearts and minds because it's so important. COVID-19, the worst pandemic since 1918, has caused some of the worst economic challenges since 1932. This vaccine, as you know, is being rolled out. You and I have talked privately. I have a piece dropping in the Hill on Thursday at 3 p.m. about, using your word, it needs to be accessible and affordable for all. The challenge with this vaccine and the challenge with COVID, it has disproportionately impacted Black and brown communities. So the vaccine, in my viewpoint, will have to be prioritized for certain constituencies. So the challenge will be getting those to Black and brown communities, rural communities. You say what to COVID-19, the response, and then the vaccine?
Follow the science, follow the experts. They've told us what to do. If you were to put this vaccine out there to quote unquote essential workers, you will be represented. We know who the essential workers are. They're not just the doctors with the medical degrees, but they're the caregivers, the people in nursing homes who work in nursing homes, the people who work in grocery stores and drugstores, the people who are keeping this economy afloat. If you get it to them first, you will be doing right by Black and brown people. Now, if you start cutting the line, someone asked me today, are you going to take that vaccine? Yes, I'm going to take it as soon as my turn. I don't want to cut the line. I don't want to go out in front of anybody, but I'm going to take the shot as soon as I get a chance. when they tell me it's fair for me to do so. So that's what I want to see done. So my committee has 3 E's that we concentrate on: making sure that the process is efficient, is effective, and is equitable. Those are the 3 E's. See, I remember the polio vaccine. They had 2. One was a shot in the arm, and the other was a little drop of serum on a lump of sugar. Who would rather have a shot in the arm over a lump of sugar? But guess who got the shots in the arm and who got the lump of sugar? So that's what we're going to be looking at to make sure. Now, these 2 vaccines that we already have, and I think we might have 3 or it might even be 4. But there's a big difference in the 2 that's already out there. One can be maintained at room temperature. The other one's got to be about 90 degrees or minus 90 degrees in order to maintain viability. So I don't want them sending the ones that to rural communities that you got the hardest time maintaining viability. I don't want anybody to be getting this vaccination and it's not effective. So in order to maintain the effectiveness of the Pfizer vaccine, they got to maintain that minus 90 degrees. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at all of this to make sure that it's fairly done.
Speaking of effectiveness, the midterms perhaps will be even more consequential than 18. You will have governor's races in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, all being held by Democrats. Arizona, Georgia, governor's race will be up. Georgia, Florida. I think it's 20 some odd U.S. Senate seats. Every member of the House will have to run in redrawn lines, primarily by Republicans all across the country. It will be a real test for Democrats and for the political operation of the president and the vice president-elect. We know that Democrats need to make more investments into state parties and state infrastructure to be prepared. What do you think, or how do you see us being prepared for the midterms, and what do you think we should be doing from a messaging and a strategy standpoint to get us prepared for a very consequential midterm election?
Well, I think that we have to really redouble our efforts. And I'm going to say, I keep saying it, and people say we're going to do it, and then we end up not doing it. And once again, these elections are won by person-to-person contact. Now, people say, well, you know, COVID-19 out there, we couldn't do the canvassing necessary. Come on now. Yes, we could. A lot of us use that as an excuse not to do it. If we engage with people in these communities and people who know these communities and people who know exactly how to navigate in these communities, how to make contact with people, we got to stop treating canvassing and the folks that we hire for canvassers with such derogatory terms like walk around money. How is it that it is fine for you to get 15, 20%, whatever you get for placing TV ads, but I cannot pay people who go out and engage people in their communities? We got to stop that. And if we don't stop that, we're going to lose. And if we don't start doing what I'm talking about, we're not going to win. We won't have to, you know, there are cultural differences out here. And I've had some experience. You've heard me tell the story. If you were to call my house when my wife was alive and ask for James, she would hang up on you. She doesn't think you got any business being that familiar with me. And I've heard her ask people, how do you know my husband so well? You know him by his first name. You know, and if you ask, she answers the doorbell and you ask to speak to Emily, she's not going to talk to you. She said, I'm 70-something years old. What's some 19-year-old going to do knocking on my door, call me by my first name? Now, that's because of cultural differences. When she was growing up, her mother was not allowed to be called Mrs. England. They called her mother by her last name. They would call white people with Mrs. and Mr. But black people were not given that kind of respect. And that's the kind of culture that we're going to have to learn to navigate in. That's just the way it is.
We'll end with this. Georgia is on everybody's mind. We are just a few weeks away from a very transformational election in Georgia, 2 Senate seats. The stakes could not be higher. We know voter suppression is real in a place like Georgia, because that is the reason why Stacey Abrams is not the governor of Georgia to this day. If you were giving advice to the Democrats, if you were saying what needs to be said at this point to the folks in Georgia, you would say what about the Senate races in Georgia and what we should be doing?
So whatever amount of money the Jews put up for TV, cut it by 20% and take that 20% and get some canvases. I would say as many people as we can get to make personal contact with voters, we ought to be doing it. And we don't have much time to do it. I can tell you right now, I've watched the lines that I've seen. Those people I've been seeing in lines thus far are not Democratic voters. If we're going to get Democratic voters in those lines, we're going to have to get people to push and pull and get people to the polls. We can practice social distancing. We can wear our masks. We can go in neighborhoods and ring doorbells and let people know, leave the door hangers there. We don't have to be there to touch them and let them know how important it is to go out to this election, for this election. We can do that. We expect for nurses' aides to go to work. We expect for those people who keep the hospitals open, the grocery stores, the drug stores, make ourselves essential to the outcome. And let's practice safety, but make the engagements that are necessary to go to the polls. I can say right now, just upon my own personal modeling, we're running behind right now in Georgia. If we want to catch up, we're going to have to get off the television and get on the ground.
The Majority Whip, the highest ranking African-American member of the U.S. Congress, the most consequential elected official of our day, Jim Clyburn. I thank you for what you did to save this country. And I thank you for the work you do every day to make sure we all stay calibrated. And I know we will be better off because of your service. And so we thank you. Third Way, my good friend Matt Bennett, and to the entire Third Way crew, thank you for keeping this party centered. We can call ourselves progressives, we can call ourselves all the many things, but we know when we lead from the center, good things happen. And that is because of the work Third Way continues to do. And so until next time, have a safe, happy holiday, wear your mask, say your prayers, do what you can to help the folks in Georgia. And we look forward to the day Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be sworn in as president and vice president of these United States.
Thank you very much for having me.